and what we can do as an industry to help fix those problems. So we have a wide range of experts here on stage. But I wanted to say one thing. We talk a lot about digital in this world, but we don't talk enough about barriers. And sometimes those barriers aren't digital. And I don't sit on bar stools. So I'm going to stand for this session. I have some old no bar stool stickers. If anyone wants one, call me and I'll put some in the post for you. So anyways, we have an excellent panel here for you. So we've got David Agar, co-founder and CEO of BankAbility. We've got Farrow, communications director at the Connection Project. We have Claire Gates, global head of payments and solutions at Crown Agents Bank. And we have Dan Howl, head of public affairs and policy at BCS. And I'm Liz Lumley, and I have been a journalist in the FinTech space for 31 years. So it's a wonderful industry. So as I mentioned before, this is an industry that talks a lot about digital, and the conventional wisdom is if we just create more digital services, create easy access to digital, that will inevitably increase access and it will increase democratization, making financial services available to a wide range of the public. But that's not the full story. And a lot of times digital services are not made for the many. They're made for what's called the average user, which tends to be maybe a bit smaller than where it would be if we really design financial services products for everyone. So I'm going to start off with David. And David, why has this idea about creating greater access to financial services not really come out in practice?
I think the whole bit about increasing access, we've moved on in a positive direction over the last few years. But where it falls down and where there are barriers, real barriers, is down to usability. So you can make a digital banking app available to anybody, but if that particular person doesn't understand the terminology, the flow, or anything like that, then it basically hampers their independence, and at best they can seek support, perhaps from a family member, but otherwise they could be financially excluded.
We're going to get further into a little bit more detail of that, but I wanted to hear from Kat a bit about what your views of that are.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. So the Connection Project brings together lots and lots of different sectors. So we've got telcos, we've got broadcasters, we've got banks, and we've got the third sector and civil society as well. The reason being that financial services, digital products don't exist in isolation. So you can have the best, most intuitive product you want, but actually there are some functional barriers to people getting involved in participating with those services. So we are really keen to look at the financial services sector in the round. So you need connectivity, you need fixed, you need mobile, you need skill, you need confidence, you need devices, it needs to be affordable for people. Mm-hmm. So as well as the products and service design, we're really keen to make sure that we've got really good, robust foundations in place to help people use them.
I'm going to stay with you and then go back to David a bit. Who exactly are we talking about? Who is being excluded and how does it happen?
So our research has shown that for too long, I think we've thought about the excluded minority, so the 5% of people who can't use these services. Actually, when you look at the research, and I'm sure lots of people in the audience will know this as well, it's not really like that. That masks a much, much more complex picture. So when you look at the research, you see that any of us can be excluded at any time, as you've just described, Liz, in loads of different ways. It can be moments of truth, it can be the order of magnitude of what you're trying to achieve, the consequences of what you're trying to do. So yes, it's true that there are people who are deeply, deeply excluded, but exclusion applies right across the piece as well. And we think it's not always about capability, so often it's about service design and about functional barriers and systemic barriers that we need to address, as well as the products and service design.
David, how about you?
Yeah, I think, first of all, you can look at multiple different communities. So people with disabilities is a big one, but also you have people of more mature years who may be struggling with digital, especially with the, I think the stat is since 2015, 62% of bank branches have closed. So therefore, there is pressure to go digital. But people's needs can change over time, and it can be on a temporary basis or it can be on a permanent basis. So it's really important to have a solution or solutions that will adapt with for each user's needs.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't think my parents could do banking services unless it was a branch. It's not in their realm of reality. It's
No.
very interesting. So, Claire, I wanted to go to you. I mean, we're talking a bit about barriers and digital creating these barriers. How can digital solve some of these problems?
Yes, thank you.
It's working.
Yep, it's working. Good. Technology is not the issue. The issue is how we deploy it, and do we really understand the user cases that we're trying to solve for? And I myself have, I've fallen foul of it myself too. I launched a digital wallet in Canada for the financial inclusion in the US, where most people have got a smartphone, so it's really quite simple to be able to deploy that. You move to other geographies, and we moved it to Africa, well, not everyone has a smartphone that enables you to use a particular digital wallet. So it's really important to balance between technology per se is not the issue, it's understanding the user cases or the market that you're trying to fulfill. And technology can be good from it enables it to be a network.
I would make sure the mic is very close to your mouth.
Okay, sorry. To ensure that you're leveraging the technology to enable transparency, the regulatory side of things as well is useful. And where I've seen it, technology deployed properly, is being able to really change a dynamic in a marketplace. And in financial inclusion, you can go to Africa and you can see, whilst there's a high percentage of people financially initially excluded, but with the local technology that's been implemented, it's been able to enable banking, savings, loans, all through a mobile wallet. Not necessarily an app, but a mobile wallet, because of the prevalence there of mobile as a form of communication. So I think it's not so much about the technology, is how you deploy it, and really understanding thoroughly what you're trying to achieve and the consumer behaviour.
I'm going to stay with you for a bit. I've got a follow-up question. So it's a bit of what's the difference between a mobile wallet and an app? Why is it not an app?
Yeah, well, so an app is an interface in many ways, and mobile, for example, I could send money over to my family in a particular market, and what I'll do is I will pay my mobile. I will pay through one way. Could be for a bank, could be for an app. It'll then go to a local market, and a consumer might not have the app, but they have got a relationship with a mobile carrier. The mobile carrier. Let's use an example, Airtel, for example. And Airtel will have capabilities to enable my family member to be able to receive that money, and then they will also have partners whereby they will enable that mobile wallet holder, the mobile wallet, not the app, to be able to go into a local agent and to remove that and withdraw that through cash. Yeah. An app is one thing, and I was asked to talk about this most recently. So when apps were first launched, and the big super apps, which we all know about, Alipay and WeChat, etc., they were actually used initially to enable rural people to have access to the internet as opposed to anything else. And it was only till later, 10 years later, that they combined it with what we now know as super apps, where they do financial payments and inclusion and bank accounts and all of these sort of things. So it's really just the difference of what people have available to them as to whether it's a wallet or a mobile app.
So, Kat, I'll ask you kind of the same question. What is this, when digital is not a barrier, how does it break down those barriers?
I think there's massive potential of digital to make life much, much easier for people. I completely agree. The tech is not the enemy. The tech is not the issue. It's about understanding how you can deploy that actually meets people where they're at. So you think about in banking, for example, the idea that 11 million people rely on someone else to help them with their banking. How do you facilitate that through technology rather than sort of preventing that from happening in an effective way? That's one example. I think there's so much potential to take the heavy lifting out of it for people, but you've got to meet people where they're at in terms of their skills, their needs, their capabilities. And we started talking about the average user. They don't exist. We've designed in complexity for people that we could be designing out using technology more effectively.
I'm going to skip the next. I'm going to save that average user question for the end because I want to bring Dan and Kathryn. I haven't forgotten about you too. So looking a little bit at what that means about not designing for the average user, but designing for everyone, or designing maybe for people with a particular need that ends. Like, how does that design process work, Dan? I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. So just to explain, BCS is the Chartered Institute for IT, so we represent 70,000 people working in technology today. And BCS is a membership organisation that has specialist interest groups, so we look at issues of digital inclusion specifically for people who are working in those fields. So we kind of approach it from the perspective of the individuals behind the systems. So we've done research on this. But we tend to approach it from the point of view of the individuals behind the systems are the ones who are most affecting the design and the deployment and the maintenance of these systems. And we see it that people who are working on this technology should be professional, they should be ethical, they should be accountable, and they should be competent, and they should be able to demonstrate these concepts as well. And when they are, then they can they have another incentive other than the company that they work for or the organisation that they are a part of, particularly when they're held to independent codes of conduct that include concepts like inclusive by design. It's much more expensive and much more inefficient to bolt on these concepts of inclusivity once the products have been designed later down the product track. But what we've found from our research and speaking to our members is that if you have professionals who are ethical through third-party organisations and professional registration, then they have more kind of incentives and more considerations earlier on in the process, which leads to better products, not just for people with additional needs, but for everybody.
I'll go to you. I mean, it's interesting. I liked what Dan said about bolting on different functionality onto a product tends to cause problems. And this is IFGS, and this is that whole sort of startup FinTech, create an MVP, create this sort of very core individual product, seems to be baked into a lot of design and development for financial services product. Is how do you switch it to the other end where you design for everyone from the start? How does that work?
Thanks, Liz. And if I could just introduce myself, because I think my name was initially missing from the screen. So nice to meet you all. I'm Kathryn Townsend. I'm Head of Customer Vulnerability at Nationwide Building Society.
I missed you. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No problem. It was missing off the screen. But we're the world's biggest building society. And it's great to hear two of my co-panelists already using the word human, but to talk about people. Because for us at Nationwide, actually having the human at the heart of what we do, and our purpose is key. Our purpose is banking, but fairer, more rewarding, and for the good of society. And that includes human channels. So alongside technology, we want to look at human channels. We're committed to our branch presence. We have the strongest branch network in the UK, 696 branches. But that's for people who want and need at that moment face-to-face banking. For those who want to and need to conduct their banking online, then they can, and that's why an inclusive app and internet bank are really key. And telephony, of course, as well, which is really crucial, inclusive telephony. So I'd like to just give one example at either end of the scale there that we're thinking of when thinking about our customers. A technical solution is an example of thinking about our customers and exploring who are those who are really excluded. And I don't see any people using BSL here today, and we don't have a BSL interpreter, but many of you may not know that BSL users' first language is BSL, not English. So therefore, a website in English is not inclusive for a BSL user. And yet we don't see enough technology, and the tech exists, to overlay BSL onto the screen to allow it to be inclusive for BSL users. And we launched Signly solution on our website a few years ago. At the other end of the scale, we've got no-tech solutions like our Speakeasy cards in branches, which are physical cards to help people who have a communication barrier, and we're actually about to roll them out to offer them for free, white label to all banks. So you've got to look at what do people really need, and not just the vast majority, the 80%, but the 20%, because if you design for them, will benefit everybody, and look at low and no-tech solutions as well as high-tech.
So I'm going to stay with you for a bit because, you mentioned the number of branches you guys have. You mentioned BSL. Although the branches are there for people like my 82-year-old father, how has the bank sort of seen how these services, which may be serving 10% of your customer base, how have you seen it make life better for the other 80%?
What's really interesting there is actually the cohorts of those who help others. So you might actually have a wider demographic of people who are the carers and the supporters and the helping hands. So actually you might have the older generations, but also who are they coming in with, and looking at those who are younger as well. We know that actually quite a lot of younger people and students actually value a face-to-face interaction, and we see that with younger people coming in who may be less mature in their knowledge of financial services and value that face-to-face. So it's about having choice based on the transaction that you're trying to perform, making the choice whether you want to self-serve or go in to get support from the branch network.
So David, I'm going to go back to you. I mean, this idea about how do you change that narrative of, instead of bolting on extra services, building those services from the start? How do you change that narrative?
I think you have to, as Dan touched on, you have to get people involved with lived experiences from the get-go, because to reverse engineer it is never going to be as good, and it's always imperative to. It reminds me of the saying, if you thinking about people with disabilities, if you know one autistic person, you know one autistic person. Everybody's needs are unique and individual, and they can change over time. So get people involved at the design stage. That should be a mandatory thing, and then things can only improve from where they are.
So Dan, I'm going to go to you. Unless you would, I'll come back to you for a comment because you're smiling at me, and I always like people that smile. But Dan, I had a quick question about, how do we as an industry make this happen? Is it nudges? Is it encouragement? Do we need to have regulations in place? Like, what is that framework to make sure this happens instead of just wishing that it happens?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it speaks to there's a policy trend generally, so my job is to kind of look at what the government's doing, what society is doing, less so the kind of granular technical issues. I'll leave those to the members. But so it's an issue that you see in kind of AI or cybersecurity as well, much more broadly. It's about how can you continue to kind of drive forward economic growth, but improve the standards as we go forward. So ideally, we don't kind of want top-down, burdensome state-level regulation that is going to inhibit growth, particularly when we've got a tech scene in Britain that is doing extremely well at the moment. So one of the solutions that the government is kind of coming towards, which is you can see it rolled out in the NHS now, is professional registration for people who are working on technology. So that's digital data and technology teams. So for example, in the NHS, anyone working on digital data and technology needs to be professionally registered by 2031. You're also seeing it in industry. So in AI, there's a concept called AI assurance, not insurance, but assurance, which is being rolled out. The government is convening a consortium to look at how that profession can expand. It's going to expand quite a lot. It's one of the solutions to how we answer that question on driving AI growth, but increasing AI standards at the same time. So it seems to be that the government agrees with BCS, fortunately, on this, that there is a solution. There's kind of a third way here where you can look at the individuals behind the systems. If they are genuinely professional, if they've got the qualifications that they need, if they're demonstrating the skills that they need, if they're ethical and they've shown that they're ethical, if they're thinking things, as David says, right at the start rather than bolting things on at the end, and if they're competent and accountable to all of these concepts outside of their organisations, then you're looking at a way forward.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I'm gonna give them a question I did not well, only half prepped from before, but I think it's not out of left field. So, Kat, I'm going to start with you. We talked a little bit in the beginning about that there is no such thing as an average user, okay? But there are, when you're a universal bank, there is this sort of, someone walks into your bank branch, someone opens up your bank app. Who is that average user to you? And everyone's going to answer this. So other people get to prep. Who is that average user?
Sorry, Liz, do you mean who do you have in front of you in that moment when that person walks in?
Who do you think?
Oh,
Describe one. Describe an average user.
you cannot describe an average user. So the reason I was smiling when David was talking, in a previous life, I used to design online services for the justice system. And it was funny because we used to involve people right from day one in testing what we designed. And the one thing I took away from that experience, I spent hundreds of hours with members of the public trying to, showing them how they could do an online court hearing. 9 times out of 10, what I designed that I thought was brilliant was terrible and did not work. And so actually the importance of designing with people in the room with you and testing it on people who are going to be using this thing is absolutely key. And so to your point, Liz, I think it is that. It's about testing services with real people from a wide range of different backgrounds, different needs, skills, capabilities to make sure they actually work, because we frankly do not know. We get it wrong a lot. So I think that's really key, David. I agree with you. So I've almost answered your question.
Well, everyone's going to get it. Claire, how about you? Who's your average user? And is there one?
Well, so when I'm thinking about it now, I'm thinking of an average user. We do a lot, Crown Agents in emerging markets. So I'm thinking of, there about a typical sort of customer out there. And there aren't typical customers. I think what's amazing nowadays is technology and the cost of deploying things is so much more cheaper than it was even 5 years ago, 3 years ago, that you don't have to, when you're designing something, you actually don't have to be too prescriptive of a target market you want to go after. So you don't always have to keep chasing the profits and the revenues that sometimes cause the wrong products to be developed for a particular segment. Because nowadays, deploying apps or deploying solutions is a lot more cost effective than it ever has been. So I think it's really important. I don't see an average user. Every market is so different. Like I learned from myself, if I go to the markets I operate in, if it's Ghana, Ethiopia, Nigeria, they're very different to maybe South Africa is, or to UK is, or to the US. So you just can't see it, but because of technology, because of the data that's available, it makes us much more flexible to be adaptive, to identify at that particular time what average user you want to go for in a particular segment.
Okay, Dan, you're next.
Okay, thank you. I have a good answer, which is that we're all average users in a way, aren't we all? But I think that if you're in this panel, then maybe you've heard of the drop curb theory, which is the theory that drop curbs on pavements were initially designed for people with additional needs, but they've benefited everyone because it means we can get onto pavements easier. And you see that in technology as well. You see kind of closed captions were originally designed for people with additional needs. Now we all use it, and it reduces the kind of noise pollution on buses and trains, which is quite a nice consequence. But there's also audiobooks and all sorts of things. So we all benefit from it. So we're all the average user in a way. And when you think about kind of large language models, the interface is more accessible for us than it would be otherwise, unless you understood kind of back office Python or something like that. So it's about taking those considerations to the point at which they need to be taken. They're already being made, but it's about making them more, going further.
David, we know your answer. Who's your average user?
The average user is a myth. It doesn't exist. Completely with you, Kat. Everybody's different. Everybody has individual needs, and that's why we're called individuals. We are unique. Everybody in this room is unique, and that's why it's a myth.
And you're going to close us out. Thank you.
I would say that to Kat's point of speaking and listening to lived experts, actually you're forever changed by them. So I'm not thinking about the average user. I'm thinking about Sarah, who's got MND and communicates using eye gaze technology. How is she going to navigate that website or telephony channel? I'm thinking about Ferras, who uses BSL. I'm thinking about Chris, who's got Down syndrome. How's he going to cope with that user interface? So I'm thinking of all the people that we've met along the journey by engaging with lived experts, because it's so valuable, and you'll get a better product for everybody because of it.
And possibly AI will not replace lived experience. Not yet. Lovely. And excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on the panel. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.